I thought I'd tell that because Luke was the only one that stood up, but I should have used his name. Over the past several weeks, we have been looking at Hebrews 11 and 12. And next Sunday morning will be our final sermon in this particular theme series. And I've enjoyed really getting involved with the study of this, and I've gotten a lot of new thoughts as I've studied the passages. Now, that might be unusual, but because Hebrews has always been one of my favorite books, and I've gone through it many times. And I've dug deep in a lot of the areas of the passage, including these passages. And I'm finding out a lot of things I did not see before. And if you recall, I have made the statement several times about these two chapters, that these chapters seem to have a lot of hidden messages, a lot of hidden inspiration, that as we get involved with the study of them, it keeps on giving. I wonder how many of you happen to remember the old-time commercial, where by a watch. It says, it takes a beating, but it keeps on ticking. You remember that? If my memory serves me right, and it has been filming me quite a bit recently, that was for Timex watches. Now, I hope I'm not wrong. But the more we get involved with the depth study of the book of Hebrews, and we dwell upon certain areas of understanding, and the more we understand, and the more we see some of the hidden truths that are there for us. How interesting to note that over the past few weeks we talked about an introduction, getting involved with what the definition for the book of Hebrews was in the beginning. Faith is where it says that faith is the substance of things, so forth. The evidence of things unseen, and so forth. Last Sunday morning, if you recall, we talked a little bit about the idea that that God is revealed as we look at the faith that we have. He provides, He's revealed as the Creator. He's a revealer of the one that rewards those that believe in Him. He provides, He guides, He fulfills His promises, and so forth. And we talked about what does the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews tells us about God. And there is quite a bit of what is told to us about God in the basic thought of the book of Hebrews. This morning, I want to get involved with the idea of what does the book of Hebrews tell us about faith. A lot of our friends that are leaning towards Calvinism feels that this particular chapter is wrong because it talks about faith and the works of faith, and they say works doesn't save. But I want to get involved with the idea of what this chapter says. I'm not concerned about what others might believe about it. This past week, a couple of days this past week, Steve found a new Bible program on the telephone. He put it on mine. I think it's called Snap Bible. And it's very interesting. And I turned to the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews, and I wanted to hear what they had to say about it because I believe that they are Calvinistic in their understanding of it. And I was shocked to hear the person that was talking, the woman, who is director of the ministries of one particular large congregation and also connected with the Dallas Theological Seminary. And as she talked about the the latter portion of the book of Hebrews, she was talking about our faith is seen by our works. And she made the point that where faith, the requirements of faith, and our faith works begins, that's the difference. I'm not sure that I barely go along with that, but I enjoyed what she had to say. But I want you to look at Hebrews 11 chapter, the 6th verse. And I want you to hear thoroughly what it has to say. Without faith, it is impossible to believe to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Now, I did not quote that exactly the way it was written. But without faith, we cannot please God. There's a lot of people that come to church. Not for how long, I'm going to say that right away. But there's a lot of people that don't have faith. And they come to the church because of different reasons. And some of these reasons I've heard down through the years, they come because of the fellowship. I know one person that went to the church because the church helps them financially because of some of these situations in their home. And people come to church because maybe the family goes and they want to be with family. But we must realize that unless we have faith, nothing that we do matters. Because without faith, it is impossible to please God. We must believe that he is. He does exist. And that he rewards us who believe in him. How beautiful that basic thought is that we recognize God is. You know, if we make that statement, everything that the world looks for is found as an answer. And one of the Facebook things I saw this past week was done by a friend of mine down in Corbin, Kentucky. And the point she made that we can go to church without faith, but we cannot be an American, a true American, without faith. And the point she was making was a slam against a lot of the things that were even said against faith in the various things that are taking place now. You know, the Jews had this problem. The Jews had a problem of going through the outward appearances of faith. The 24th chapter of the book of Matthew, for instance, probably the 25th, I'm sorry about that. Talks about the woes of the scribes and the Pharisees, the hypocrites. Because they say one thing and do exactly the opposite in their life. But notice what Amos, the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 24 says. I hate, and this is God writing through the prophet, I hate, I despise your feast days. And I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. He's talking about the smell of the incense that is burned. Though ye offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat hearts. Take thou away from the noise of thy songs. I will not hear the melody of thy vows. But let judgment run down as waters, of righteousness as mighty dreams. The Israelites had gone to a point where they were going through the motion without going through the living. I think that is very, very strong. Jesus, when he was going through his ministry in Mark the 7th chapter, verses 6 through 9, talks about Isaiah. And in this he answered and said unto them, well hath Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written. The people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, for laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, as the worship of pots and cups, and many other things like you do. And he said unto them, full well ye reject the commandment of God, that ye might keep your own tradition. What better description of our land, of our world, do we find than that? We must have faith to please God. What we do must come from a heart of faith, a heart of love. And what we experience needs to come through a heart that is dedicated, a heart that is committed to the will of God. So how important is faith? And what does this section say about faith? Faith is important. Unless what we do is motivated by our faith, it means nothing. Many, many years ago, I served the church in Titusville, Pennsylvania. And if Mike will do it, he will show you a picture of a big smallmouth bass that they caught in Lake Erie area. And that was only about 35, 40 miles from where we preached. We used to get that lake action all the time with snow on the ground. But as you think of this idea, the pictures we take, if we don't fish without bait, if we don't have the necessary equipment, we won't catch anything. I kid around with people and tell them I like to fish, but I don't want to hook a bait on my end of my line. I just want to sit there and rest and relax and meditate. We have to have faith. We have to have works that are motivated by our faith. And James makes the statement that faith without works is dead. The last few verses of the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews is one of the most interesting. And the thing that it emphasizes here is the idea that faith is necessary to be able to overcome. Listen to what he says. Talking about what shall we say then of mentions a bunch of people, then beginning with the third verse. Who through faith have subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, attained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness that were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to fight the enemies of the aliens. Women received their dead back to life, and others were tortured and accepted deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trials of cruel mockings and their scourgings. They murmur of heads, bonds, and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with a sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And these all obtained, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promises, as God hath, having provided some better thing of them us. They without us should they have not been made perfect. Faith endured all things. Endures. Faith overcomes. And no matter what happens in life, we will continue to fight the good fight of faith. I could not help but think of the hymn, Faith is the Victory. Listen to these words. Encamped along the hills of light, ye Christian soldiers rise, and press the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies. Against the foe and bells below, to all your strength be hurled. Faith is the victory we know that overcomes the world. I'm not going to read it all. I'm not going to read it all, but I want you to see that we need to realize that if we're going to overcome, we're going to have faith, not in ourselves, but faith in God and God's will be done. I think of faith. Steve, when he was growing up, and I meant to ask him if I could do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And several times, made me angry. I remember one time we used to love to go to a place in Pennsylvania around Conneautville that was called Fairyland Forest. The kids loved to go there. It was a place where you go and they had depictions or displays of various nursery rhymes that were told to kids. There were wild animals that ran loose that had been tamed. Deer that loved kids would come up, and the kids could pet the deer and things of this sort. Rabbits that would come up and let you pick them up, wild rabbits. The kids just loved it. So one day, one summer, we sat down, we counted the money that we were saving up to go, and we didn't have enough. We, little red pocketbook, we kept that money in. Every time we got a little bit extra, we put it in there. But we only had about half of what we needed. So I said, well, we'll just keep the money and we'll keep putting in until we have enough money that we can go. That Sunday morning, I was sitting in the pulpit as the offering was taken. And as the offering was taken, I saw Steve pull out that little red pocketbook, open it up, and just dump it in the offering plate. And I thought, well, there goes our trip. We're not going to make it. And after church, I said, Steve, you know, while you're dropping all that money in the offering plate, we're not going to be able to go to Fairyland Forest. Steve looked at me and said, Dad, you don't understand. He said, Dad, you just don't understand what I did. I said, well, tell me what you did. He said, I gave the money to God and asked God to give it back to me so that we would have enough money. That was the week of Steve's birthday. During the week, my mother and Dad gave him $40 for him to go do what he wanted. His mother and Dad gave him $20. We were still coming a little bit short because we were 4 of us. We're going to have to pay to get in. It was $15 each. And we wanted something for lunch. Neighbor came down. Hey, Steve, I want you to run an errand for me. Will you do it? And Steve was only about 6 or 7 years of age. I listened, and they wanted him to run up to the store, which is on our block, and buy some groceries for him. And they couldn't leave the house too well because they had a sick person in the house. So Steve went up and got $10 for it. By the time that week was over, Steve had almost triple the amount of money that he put in the offering. Far enough to be able to go. And that year, we went at Steve's expense. He paid for it all. Have faith. Whatever you do it through faith, understanding that God will reward us for our faith. we're going to be singing. One verse of all must persuade. Anybody needs to make a decision, we invite you to come and stand.